40 years ago, over 2 weeks, Los Angeles hosted the Summer Olympics, and we're here to talk about the most important moments. You know, dressage, rifle shooting, and synchronized swimming. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
Rick, hello everyone.
And what do you tell folks about this week's episode?
Well, this is going to be a unique episode, I think. We're going back into the world of sports, but one of the big sporting events, the 1984 Summer Olympics. And I thought it'd be cool because, well, this is the 40th anniversary of those fabled Los Angeles Games. The Olympics are coming back in the next 4 years to Los Angeles in 2028. And it seems like a good time to kind of reflect on it. And the 1980s, I thought, great decade. I was growing up and I was young enough to really be affected by a lot of stuff that was going on. And 1984 to me is one of perhaps the most 1980s year of the 1980s.
And I think the 1984 Olympics are one of the most iconic things from the 80s.
Yes.
And at least in our lifetime, the most iconic Olympics.
I was never really a watcher of the Olympics or knew much about them until the 1984 Olympics.
Well, yeah, I don't think... I don't think we're old enough to... I mean...
I have big sports memories, though, before that.
Yeah, but, I mean, because from the U.S. point of view, of course, we didn't have 1980 Summer Olympics. I do remember the Winter Olympics, some from 1980. 76, I wouldn't. The only thing I remember is Bruce Jenner. Yeah. And because he was all over the place.
Right. Became like a star. Kind of like, that was more the thing, like more like people like Dorothy Hamill or Mark Spitz.
Yes, yeah.
Bruce Jenner. They were TV stars,
right.
Celebrities. But as far as like the actual sports, like, by 1984, I was really into like baseball, football, basketball, but not so much the Olympic sports.
Yeah.
And like the ramp up to 1984 because of, the circumstances with the Soviet Union, the Soviet bloc boycotting, and it being in Los Angeles, everybody knew, hey, this is going to be a big year for the United States. And so there was the big hype. And it fascinates me as kind of like a piece of culture. And also, like, I thought we could take a look at how, ABC covered it. So as a sporting event and also as a television event. And I'll mention, too, that I read a book by John Wertheim called Glory Days. It's about the summer of 1984. Mm-hmm. And the full title is Glory Days, the summer of 1984 and the 90 days that changed sports and the culture. Mm-hmm. So it's an excellent book and has, a nice section of the Olympics, but it also talks a lot about one of the big stars of the Olympics, Michael Jordan, who sort of was catapulted to stardom, very soon after this. And it's a good reminder that even back then, and he has a lot of evidence for this, like you tend to think now, well, Jordan wasn't really a big deal until he got to the NBA, but no, he was a very big deal in college. And even then, like, they knew it, and they've got quotes from like his coach, Olympic coach Bob Knight, and all these other people saying, oh, look out for Jordan's going to be like the best of them all. Right. So even back then, he was kind of like this emerging superstar.
And what are some of the other things that happened in the 90 days?
Well, you had, like, sports-wise, you had like the Chicago Cubs, who were a national profile team, were really big, and we talked about them a little bit in our Punky Brewster episode, I believe. They went on to win their division that year, so that was a big thing. Wayne Gretzky, there's some stuff on him. In the culture, like the rise of like the Mac computer. Yeah. Was around this time. The Jacksons Victory Tour, which is very interesting because that indirectly led to the modern New England Patriots dynasty, because the Jacksons tour was such a disaster, and it was backed by one of the then owner of the New England Patriots, and it wound up being like such a disaster, and like the circumstances led to him selling the team to Robert Kraft, who built the Patriots into a multiple Super Bowl winning team. And that was something that's a kind of interesting story itself, because the Jacksons were huge. And Michael Jackson didn't really want to tour with his brothers, but he sort of got strong-armed into it by his dad. He wanted the brothers to get a payday, and Don King was involved, and the whole tour became like this weird thing. Wow! So that was going on, and you think 1984,
obviously from the title, I'm assuming.
Springsteen is on the cover, I think, but there's not like a whole dedicated section to him.
Right.
But yeah, it was, and he also gets into the pre-WrestleMania rise of the WWF, which became popular on MTV, like almost a full year before WrestleMania, with like the brawl to settle it all, the war to settle the score, with Cyndi Lauper getting involved in the WWF and Hulk Hogan against Roddy Piper. So that's something that gets into, and in the midst of all this, you had these 1984 Olympics, and also like I think the Magic Larry Bird final like kind of ending with that season ending in the summer. So you have all this stuff going on, and yeah, you get this great Olympics kind of like capping off this summer, going through like late July into August. Yeah, and it all. And one other thing, like TV related, is ESPN. It was around this time that they went to the dual revenue stream that we're hearing a lot about now in the age of cord cutting, where they would get advertising money, but also, hey, let's charge cable companies for this. Yeah. And that helped them, get more sports rights, which in turn helped them raise their fees. And it was around this time that they started getting that dual revenue stream for ESPN, which is something you might normally think about. And ESPN was apparently a bidder for the TV rights to the 1984 Olympics, which I have no idea how that would have worked. No. Because ESPN was barely a thing when I guess they awarded the rights to Los Angeles before the TV rights, maybe. And then that made it a pretty good proposition. But yeah, ABC wound up winning the rights, as they did usually in the Olympics. And they were, at the time, they were the network of the Olympics, essentially.
Yeah, when did that stop?
So they say, like at the end in the closing ceremonies, they say, "See you in Seoul." Yeah. NBC televised the Seoul Olympics, but I think the next Winter Olympics were actually ABC. Okay. And then 1992 on, I believe NBC just started buying all the Olympics. Right. Or no, that's not true.
CBS had
the Tanya Harding. Yeah. Yeah, because they also started like staggering the Olympics. Right. Like now we're kind of there every 2 years, but at the time you would do both of them in every 4 years, which I kind of like the way they do it now.
It probably makes more sense for them.
Yeah. Why double up in the same year? Probably give each Olympics more time.
But at the same time, it's just not the same thing anymore. Yeah. I mean, it really was. I think, especially the Summer Olympics, because they're happening in the summer when not a lot else is on. Right. But it just seemed like they would just dominate what everyone was watching for a couple weeks.
Well, that's one thing I was curious about, was what did the Olympics actually do for ABC? They spent a lot of money for these rights. Well, if we back up, I think we mentioned this before maybe, but NBC was the lucky winner of the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. And they spent a lot of money and prepared all sorts of like stuff around that, only to be left holding the bag when the United States boycotted. So they scaled back on the coverage, way back, and it was hardly a thing. The 1980 Olympics, at least here, it wasn't.
But they still covered it. That's interesting.
They did, yeah. They did, but they cut back like on the number of hours and I think the live coverage, and they spent less money on the actual production of the games, I think.
Right. Just I'm kind of surprised they wouldn't have been pressured to join the boycott.
Yeah, I don't know if that was really a thing. That's a good point. I mean, but I think I'm not sure about that. So like 1984 is like the big Olympic comeback here. Mm-hmm. So I guess Sarajevo had already taken place, the Winter Olympics. Yeah. And ABC, it came down to Los Angeles, and this is another thing that I didn't realize. Los Angeles was basically given these games. Now it's a big bidding cycle. Right. Yeah. But the other competitor was Iran, and because the rights were they were given in the late 70s, and with all the turmoil there, Iran dropped out, and Los Angeles basically negotiated with the IOC, International Olympic Committee themselves. They really didn't have any competition. So and I think it had been years since they had it, 50 years or whatever since they had been in Los Angeles. So
30.
Yeah, like
30 is the 50s, right?
Was it the 50s they were in Los Angeles?
I think so. I think that's what I heard. In some of the stuff I was watching, but I could be wrong.
But they had a lot of the Summer Olympics had been in Montreal in 1976. There's the Munich Games 72 where they had the tragedy. Yeah. 68 was Mexico City, and so you had these other high profile games, but the 1980 was a huge dud. So I think everybody thought, well, this is going to come back, and then of course the Soviets boycott. Right. But you know what? Who cared?
Yeah. I mean, it helped the U.S. or potentially helped them. You know what's important about the Mexico City games?
What's that?
They were at elevation.
They were at elevation, yes. Everything with those games has an asterisk. Yes. At elevation.
Elevation and something about some people raising their hands.
Yes. You nailed it. Yeah. Those are the big takeaways. So Los Angeles, did a big push, and Peter Ubroth was the man tasked with organizing the games, and they went up making a profit of $200 million supposedly, which is amazing considering the Olympics lose money nowadays.
Yeah, I know. And the Olympics and the World Cup.
Yeah, and so we're looking at this year Paris having the Olympics, but we've seen a lot of cycles where it's authoritarian regimes hosting the Olympics and bidding for them, and people just dropping out, and hearing all these things about cost overruns. Well, Los Angeles avoided that. One of the ways they avoided that was commercializing them somewhat and having private-public partnerships. So they bring in these corporate sponsors, but they didn't have to pay a lot of public money to it. So they didn't spend a lot of money building new facilities because they used what they already had in the area, which was plenty of stuff.
Yeah, they already had an Olympic Coliseum.
Yeah, that's right. It was
that worked out
there in the name.
Yeah, and of course, Pauley Pavilion.
Yes. The legendary Pauley Pavilion.
And I mean, I don't know if, I guess they always done that, the kind of spreading it out over geographic areas. Maybe not, but that, when you hear that some little bit I saw Frank Gifford talking, as far north as Santa Barbara and as far south as so-and-so. And those were, for Not the big events.
Yeah, I heard
the yachting
in Santa Luisa.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like a huge like footprint, but I guess they took advantage of it. Yeah. And yeah, you kind of think of like the Coliseum being like the epicenter of everything, but yeah, they had all these events spread out all over the place. And but I looked into like, ABC and how and they did dominate during this period.
Yeah.
But I was curious, like, well, did this actually help? Because that's part of the rationale, right? When you pay lots of money for like rights to these events, like, oh well, we'll make it back on promotion.
Right.
We'll get all this promotion. We'll build up the network. Well, the 83-84 season, ABC was second, and the 84-85 season, so after these games, they were third. Part of that is the rise of NBC, as we talked about. But so, like, out of the top 20 in this 1984-85 season, they did have the number one show, which was Dynasty. But the only other two shows in the top 20 were Hotel and The Fall Guy. So yeah, Hotel was actually, I think Hotel like followed or preceded Dynasty. And The Fall Guy might have been on the same night too, Wednesdays, but it might have drafted a little bit on some of those shows. But yeah, so that was like it for them. And other than that, it was CBS and NBC at this time. So ABC was like the Olympic network, and they did huge ratings for these, but they didn't really build on it. Didn't get any momentum that I can see into that following TV season.
But they probably made big advertising bucks.
They did, yeah. And I was kind of trying to find like ratings information, and it looks to me like I think the peak was like the closing ceremony, which is not surprising.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of a common thing. And it was on a Sunday too, the closing ceremony. It seemed like during the week, but they were getting like 2 or 3 times what else was on the other networks, like as far as the ratings each night.
Breaking news.
Yes.
Apologize. It was 1932.
1932. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I was off by. You were right on when you said 50 years.
Yeah. Well, so 32 and then 36 was like in Germany.
Yeah.
With Jesse Owens winning 4 gold medals.
Yes. And obviously 84. You said 28? 2028?
Yes, 2028. The Olympics will return to Los Angeles, and they'll have a tough act to follow. But these 84 Olympics, I mean, to me, and one of the reasons I like kind of revisiting that time period is I just felt good watching him.
Yeah.
The USA was winning. I had like the mascot Sam, the eagle with the torch. I had a little stuffed animal of him.
Yeah.
And I remember watching a lot of these Olympics. They're on all day. It was the summer.
Right. Yeah.
So they'd be on different day periods and stuff, and that was all like the sporting world was talking about. No offense to the 1984 Chicago Cubs, but yeah, the Olympics for these 2 weeks, there was a big deal, and it made huge stars out of everybody. And I just remember having that sense of feeling good about the USA and enjoying the Olympics, and promotion was everywhere. You had McDonald's, all these sponsors getting involved. It seemed like everything had a sponsor, and maybe one of the first times where you had like the official so-and-so of the Olympic Games, and now it's commonplace, or the official so-and-so of the official credit card of the Olympic Games. I don't think that was as big a thing until these 1984 Olympics.
Yeah, like I remember the star logo. It was nice just watching clips and seeing that in the background. Like, oh, I know that 3 or 4 stars, lines running through them. Just the whole thing. Yeah, it was a huge deal.
It came off very well too. And how about that John Williams theme for the LA Olympics? That was awesome. Yeah. And I do remember like for a while, like leading up to it, I remember like on shows like Happy Days or Three's Company or whatever, or you'd see the commercials, for the lineup, and ABC had for a while like home of the Olympics or something like that. So I think for a while they would have that. So they were really like hyping it up, and
I'm sure
it worked. I enjoyed it. I think there's been certain like Olympic moments since then that I remember watching and maybe getting into them, and like certain athletes. But as far as like being like absorbed in a whole Olympics, I don't think I've ever been as much into something as I was. And I was too young to really be into it like as a sports fan like I would be now. But yeah that was kind of like peak Olympics for me.
Right. When I was kind of looking at what I'm going to watch, because I wanted to watch things I remembered, I realized I didn't, certain things I didn't remember at all, like swimming. I think later years I remember more about maybe 88 or 92. Although I did see like maybe during I don't know, somewhere there was a shot of Greg Lundqvist. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. But mostly I remember track and gymnastics. I mean, I think that's what most people would remember. And yachting. I was big into the yachting.
Yeah, you were?
Yeah.
Well, there's years in between America's Cup races, so you have to have something to amuse you,
right?
To get your fix.
Yeah. So that's mostly what I focus on watching.
Yeah, and I was kind of trying to just get a feel for all kinds of different things. Yeah. But yeah, I was kind of drawn to some of the things I remembered, and the other thing too is, of course, now with cable, and there's been different experimenting with how you present the games, and NBC's kind of got a monopoly on it. But back then, it was ABC.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
You watch what they showed you.
Right. And they're jumping around, and some of it's on tape. And
and
some of it's even on tape I guess because they went to commercial or something, and then they're like, it's a live thing, but then here's a little bit on tape.
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
don't know how they're managing it.
Yeah, there was like a moment during one of the Carl Lewis race. I think it was the 100 meters, like one of the most glamorous Olympic events there is, where and they're doing it in the Coliseum, and you kind of forget that they're running like multiple events at the same time.
Yeah.
So Al Michaels is like the crowd's like cheering while they're getting in the start. They're like, actually, this might have been the 400-meter hurdles with Edwin Moses.
Okay,
but there's like, well, you hear the crowd reacting to a triple jump attempt. But now we're focused on the 400 meters. So this is like one of the biggest events and they're having like heats and other events going on. It just seems weird. Yeah. But I guess that's a track event for you.
Yeah. I think I don't even know how people watch that stuff live.
Yeah.
But what do you look? I mean, that I just don't know how you focus your attention.
No, it just seemed like it would be cool to like go to something like that and just see like the spectacle of it.
Yeah.
But there's probably also like a lot of like just chaos and just like not being able to tell what's going on.
Right. I'd almost want to be able to walk around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me just stand over here and watch the hammer toss.
Well, that's why you can be thankful to have the expert ABC Sports coverage of Rune Arledge here. And he brought we talked about the Wide World of Sports earlier.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like, to me, this is on the edge of like the relevancy of Wide World of Sports like still being a thing. Mm-hmm. And other shows like NBC had like Sports World and CBS had CBS Sports Saturday. But the Olympics to me is like this big potpourri of sports. And I think like in 1984, Wide World was still relevant. You'd sort of get exposed if you were looking for it to like track and things like that and even more obscure sports.
Yeah.
And I think like as you got into the 90s, it became less of a thing. And the broadcast networks especially, they were busy showing like college football all day or something like that. And they wouldn't devote as much time to these Olympic sports.
But this is peak Jim McKay.
Yeah.
Holding down the fort. Frank Gifford and Kathleen Sullivan in the mornings.
Yeah, Kathleen Sullivan. I remember that being a big deal. She was like the first woman to be anchoring Olympic coverage. Oh, and I really remember it being like, oh, hey, there's a female behind the desk. I remember it being like a big thing back then.
It's weird. I guess I just like seems to me a fixture of the 80s.
Yeah.
She was on the CBS Morning Show, one of the versions of the CBS Morning Show. I think after this, maybe.
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was like wasn't on any of those things as long as you might think.
No, but a steady hand.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's pretty young. She's like in her early 30s, I think, during this.
Frank Gifford looking young.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy. They paired her with Frank Gifford, like the kind of veteran hand, and I think they had Jim Lampley was doing like late night coverage.
Yes.
And he was very young at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get this interesting blend of like veterans and like young talent, I guess, on ABC. They were using through these games.
I don't know if I'd want to be winding down my night listening to Jim Lampley report things. It's too intense.
Yeah, it's weird. And he's doing like the swimming too.
Yeah, that's
which seems odd because Cosell's doing the boxing.
Of course.
Yeah, so Howard Cosell was still around back then.
Yeah.
Howard Cosell, toupee or no toupee? What do you think?
Oh. There's that hilarious moment of every Olympics where someone throws him in the pool.
Yes.
Just like a Battle of the Network Stars.
Yeah.
It's gotta happen.
Yeah. Well,
that's why he wasn't covering swimming.
That's right. He refused.
He's like,
No,
but another hilarious moment. He would late at night they would sneak into the diving thing. He would do his famous triple somersault off the high dive. If they talking the entire way down.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Describing as if the devoted fans had their way and elevated dunk tank to an Olympic sport, Cosell probably would have done that too.
Yeah,
but it wasn't meant to be, at least not at these games.
I know.
And it's funny because too, like sports like baseball and tennis were just demonstration sports.
Yes,
so they're sort of mentioned but not really shown.
And even, I mean, I don't know if this is accurate, but just based on you found this amazing playlist of 300 something clips, but it looked like the basketball stuff was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah,
I don't know if they were showing full games at all.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think so.
Yeah.
At least, I guess one thing ABC had was like, because it's like an American, it's 3 hours behind, but they had the advantage of like most of the finals being in, they could show them live in prime time if they wanted. But yeah, I don't think basketball was like the emphasis. It would be like, even obviously you'd have the Dream Team in 1992.
Yeah, but even before, I think 88 it was, because I remember watching games. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were cutting away, but I just remember watching games that year.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot of the college players I was following.
Right. You know? I think like the big events were like track and gymnastics.
Yeah.
Like maybe not so much as they were like now it's like heavy gymnastics and and track I don't think is as emphasized as much. But then again you had like these legends of American track in 1984, so of course they're going to spotlight them.
Yeah, and in the gymnastics that I watched, they kind of mentioned that, it was the, Nadia Comaneci, is that 72? 76, but that whole, she kind of set off the other countries being more engaged with it. The U.S. wasn't that. So if you think about it, I mean, that's only 8 years.
Right.
And they've already kind of ascended. I mean, I guess there were some. I don't know when Kathy Rigby, that was probably the same year, right?
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah, but, Mary Lou Retton watched that and as an 8-year-old wanted to be a gymnast. But
and how about that? How about the fact that like this was like China's first time bringing a full Olympic team over since like 1952 or something, or participating in the Olympics, I should say, not just bringing it to the United States.
Yeah.
And now China's like dominant,
right?
But they weren't even really going to the Olympics until 1984.
Huh.
And I think the very first medal was won by somebody from China. I forget which event. I think one of the track events.
Okay.
And this particular Olympiad.
Yes.
But yeah, that's just amazing to think of. And let me say this too. As far as like the Soviets being there, it was kind of a bummer. But yeah, it didn't really bother me. And
right.
I might have brought this up before in the podcast, but you know, in professional wrestling back then, you'd have this territory system a lot of times. You know, people have different territories. And a lot of times you'd have like the champion of the territory would come out and say, he'd give an open challenge to anybody. Say, look, you know, Hulk Hogan or whatever, you want to come down and wrestle me? Fine, I'll take on anybody. He said, if you don't come down, and then when they didn't come wrestle them, because why would you? You'd say, well, those guys are just company champions. I'll wrestle anybody. You know, you're sort of punching up. And in this case, it's like, hey, you know, if you don't show up, you don't win. You know, if you don't play, so what? You know, we're the best. You know, prove it. You know, if you want to come out. So any other country, I think, is just a company champion if they don't come to these Olympics. So I don't see it now.
And I'm like in the track and field, one of the races they mentioned, they're like, well, you know, I think it was the maybe 4x100 relay, or maybe it was the one, is it the 200 meter where like all three Americans won, or Americans won all three medals. But they mentioned, you know, as far as track and field, that boycott wouldn't have affected that really. I mean, maybe some of the things like shot put or something. But
yeah, I thought from sampling the ABC coverage, and this is one of the reasons this episode is unique because we didn't watch the exact same stuff, and we didn't even say, okay, we'll both watch this or whatever. You know? Yeah. But one of the things I thought was kind of interesting was that ABC's coverage, I thought handled it pretty well from what I saw. Like a lot of events where they'd say like, this is one event that was hurt by the boycott because like 7 of the top 10 would have been from the Soviet bloc. But other ones they'd say, like you said, like, you know, this one not really. So they made it a story without dwelling on it. And I think they gave it about the appropriate amount of coverage from what I've seen. I think the weightlifting and some of like the women's events, I think were heavily affected by the boycott, but a lot of them were not.
Yeah, and I think probably the big powerhouse from that block, Romania, still came in gymnastics, in women's gymnastics. That's right. Still there. So
I think that's one of the ones where they say we were probably helped by that, but that was kind of a bummer.
Yeah,
it's kind of a bummer to think about that.
Right.
But still, it was kind of a remarkable achievement. I mean, so Mary Lou Retton,
yes,
one of the huge stars created by the Olympics, right?
Yeah,
she was ubiquitous. She made it to the Wheaties box. I mean, it was incredible. And just watching her, she was a TV star right away.
Yeah, and I mean, she really didn't seem like she did much after that.
No,
I thought she was did some broadcasting, but our Wikipedia article doesn't mention her being a broadcaster. So
well, I mean, I guess that's part of it. Is like a lot of these sports you don't hear about for 4 years, right?
Yeah,
there's not like a great track circuit.
But I thought maybe
or gymnastics
bring her out for Olympics to cover gymnastics, but I guess not.
And there was also that kind of weird storyline with that Bella Caroli, the coach, and like him being the former coach of the Romanians, and like coming in and
being a defector,
just being all vocal and like everything. I remember that being a big story during the Olympics too.
Well, this one they had him mic'd up in the all-arounds where she won her gold medal. ABC had him mic'd up the whole time, so every now and then they cut in like, yes.
Clearly not a shy man.
No, not at all.
Taking the camera time, but yeah, I just remember that like, and Mary Lou Retton hitting like those 10s on the vault or whatever, and the all around. I mean, a lot of this was stuff I didn't understand at the time, and I really still don't understand some of these like judging events.
Judging is especially like that. Every now and then, if there's a disagreement, then they talk about it, and you see all these women in yellow coats like gathered around and arguing with each other.
Right.
What is this? Unless somebody falls.
Yeah.
You're like, it looks good to me. It's like diving. And I didn't really watch any of the diving, but I remember watching it, at times. And just like the announcers always seem to get really, their analysis, a little bit of splash.
Yeah.
Like, you just dove off a 40-foot tower.
Yeah. Well, that's what it comes down. It seemed like every gymnastics thing comes down to, do you stick the landing?
Yeah.
Like no matter what it is, like do you stick the landing or do you hop a little bit? Yeah. That's kind of a cool thing too, is like with the diving, I guess the way they stagger the events. So Jack Whitaker, longtime ABC sports pro, and known as an essayist extraordinaire. You don't have many essayists anymore. You have debaters and arguers now.
Yeah.
Right. But so Jack Whitaker was like the lead announcer on the diving and the gymnastics, I think.
Oh. Okay.
So I guess they did them, separate weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Greg Louganis was like the big star of the diving.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking of a different sport. Bud Collins did tennis and.
Yeah, Bud Collins.
Not for the Olympics.
Was NBC.
NBC.
Yeah. So he would be doing like.
He did gymnastics for when NBC took over.
He might have.
Or ice skating.
Bud Collins. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's Dick Enberg.
Yeah. yeah, Dick Enberg was like one of the big voices.
Yeah.
I think he was doing like the opening ceremonies and stuff, and he was like the big guy before Costas took over.
They didn't have Tom Brokaw do it? They probably did.
Yeah. Well,
I just, because Peter Jennings' presence here is amusing.
Yeah, I did like Peter. Let me say one thing about Greg Louganis.
Yeah.
Is that I wanted to watch some of the, just the diving, but the funny thing is, like, Greg Louganis was so dominant that a lot of the diving coverage, they're not even bothering. It's like they're just showing people for second and third place, I think, because Greg Louganis like clinched it like early on. But he was like amazing. But like all the things like, wow, perfect dive. This is incredible, So he totally ran away with it. So
yeah, I certainly remember him. But then he was around a few more Olympics.
Yeah, well, he banged his head.
He banged his head, and was that 88 or was that 90?
It must have been 88, I think.
Yeah, I remember that for sure. So I started to watch that. Plus, that's confusing because all the heats and this and that.
Yeah,
I just want to watch the final.
Yeah.
I didn't watch heats.
Right.
Yeah, but since I mentioned Peter Jennings, maybe we can start with the opening ceremonies, which I admit I did not watch a lot of.
Yeah, I didn't watch all of the opening ceremonies
because it was 3 hours.
Yeah, huge event.
Yeah, but it did both in the opening and closing ceremonies. It's just something about Peter Jennings and Jim McKay, just the way they were announced. I mean, it had the tenor of like Willard Scott and somebody doing the Macy's parade or the Rose Bowl parade. That's what it really reminded me.
Yeah.
450 dancers out there right now.
Yeah.
Or this weighs 2 tons. And 84 pianists, grand pianos, and the little factoids.
Yeah, and I think they kind of pioneered this business. Like now it's become like, okay, you're gonna, like, it seems like every time there's a TV Olympics, they have some kind of profile in the announcers that are doing the opening and how they prepare and do like a briefing book with like information about every country or whatever. And they were prepared, but there's a certain laid back element to it.
Oh, I should have watched some. I skipped over all the marching athletes, but that probably had some good.
Yeah, Peter Jennings was jumping in there.
In Bhutan, they do. Their favorite cuisine is this.
You're right. Fun facts. They're a very classy duo.
Yes.
I mean, the thing about Jim McKay is he was like Mr. Olympics for so many years.
Of course.
And Peter Jennings are like really, I like the two of them together. And Peter Jennings was so smooth. I mean, what a broadcaster he was. And Jim McKay was too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the dynamic of them, like announcing, but they also weren't like over discussing. Like,
right.
They were letting a lot of it speak for themselves, which I thought, or speak for itself, which was cool.
Find a nice moment to jump in, especially if there's a musical number or something going on, and try to find a spot to pop in and not talk over it.
Yeah, I thought they had the good combination of gravity but also just the right amount of like gee whizness about it. They also seem to be genuinely like awed by some of it. Yeah, which is kind of interesting.
So the opening ceremonies, I was kind of fast forwarding. It would have been nice if the one I watched had bookmarks, but I got to some point and I just stopped, and Aaron Copland's Rodeo is playing, and there's all these dancers like building a town on the field, and
yeah,
like what? Then I fast forward some more, and then it's like this is the Dixieland music. So David Wolper wanted to make sure to include black music. And this and that, and then all these black dancers for that, and then fast forward some more, and there was like there were people dancing to the song one from the chorus line, and then in the middle of it transitioned to Beat It. Like a really corny version of Beat It, and then transition back and either, I think, Michael Jackson's Beat It. And then there's a thing where they're performing Rhapsody in Blue, and they have 84 grand piano that kind of slide out of the arches.
Oh man!
Yeah, as they said, the crowd gasps. So and they're all and none of them had sheet music. I don't know how they coordinated that at all. It's insane.
Right.
Really.
Well, give credit to producer, as you mentioned, David L. Wolper.
Yeah.
Produced Roots.
Right.
And some other high-profile miniseries at the time, maybe most famous for those. But yeah, he did quite a job. He actually, so I read he won like an Oscar, an honorary Oscar for producing all this stuff.
Okay.
Which seems a little odd, yeah.
Yeah. Seems like an Emmy, certainly.
Yes, and Peter Ubroth was Time Magazine's Man of the Year for spearheading these games.
So what was his deal? Because I know after this he became the commissioner of baseball.
Yeah, he started out he was a businessman, and he had like travel, I think, like the travel business was his like field, and he sort of like sold out one company and started another one, and kind of that's how he got his money. And just like a businessman, they approached to do this, and he took it on. And, yeah, became the commissioner of baseball, and arguably on one hand he did very well for Major League Baseball after this.
Yeah,
he grew the game, improved lots of things, but there's this little thing where the owners were found guilty of collusion,
right,
and paid a huge settlement, and he sort of resigned in disgrace after that.
Yes, and is that when
Bart Giamatti?
Yeah. Yes.
So that, and then this is peak Peter Ueberroth at this point.
Yeah.
This 1984 Olympics wasn't accomplished. And David Wolper, I mean, to me, the opening ceremonies were crazy. There's a lot of stuff.
Yes.
I was most interested in kind of like the athletic, the Olympic torch. Mm-hmm. So I watched a lot of that. That was a cool moment.
When the lighting of it, was really cool. Rayford Johnson?
Yes.
Yes. Former decathlete, and as Jim McKay said, great friend of Robert Kennedy, and was there, witnessed there when the horrible thing happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he actually subdued Sirhan Sirhan, right?
Yeah.
Took the gun away from him. He was like right there, and he was like an activist for years. And I remember at the time, I remember kind of like thinking, who's this Rayford Johnson guy? I did, and he was like in a sport that I didn't really follow and everything. And then years later, you learn more about Rayford Johnson. You see like, okay, I think he's got local ties, so it was a good choice, and the first black individual to do this, I guess.
Yeah.
So quite a moment, and they had Jesse Owens' like granddaughter running the torch, like
handed it
at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
She took it and she did a couple laps around the track, and then handed it to Rayford Johnson. And there's just something like dramatic about that moment, just like the handoffs and of course like the whole torch across America. It became a whole thing. Yeah, starting from New York to Los Angeles, like very again something else to build up hype for it.
Yeah, and I mean they already, because it was an Olympic Coliseum, they already had I don't know if they built a new thing or whatever, but they had the thing up there. But he ran up 96 steps.
Yeah,
but they had to add. There's like this. He ran up all the steps that are built into the Coliseum, and then this hydraulic staircase raised up, and somehow was timed perfectly to lock into place when he got there. He ran up that, and then he lit a thing that sent the flames through the Olympic rings and up to it was really cool.
It was cool, and something else about this too is nobody knew who it was. It was like a big mystery.
Oh, okay.
So like during the lead up, when they're showing like the last, like they didn't know who was going to be the one to carry the torch into the stadium.
Yeah.
So that was so Jim McKay's like talking. We'll have one more person. He knew that there was going to be somebody else, but they didn't know who it was going to be.
Okay.
They're like, well, it's Rayford Johnson, and it's just kind of like something cool that I guess that's something, a tradition, that it's kind of a mystery, who's going to light the torch and everything like that.
Right. But
very memorable moment and very stirring, actually, to me. I mean, one of the things that I love about this, too, is watching is it makes me nostalgic for a time when, okay, say what you will about, Reaganomics, Reagan's America, not everybody was a winner, we know that. But for me, personally, in 1984, it was USA, and everything was pretty cool.
Right.
I had a good 1984, okay?
Yeah.
And just seeing people in the stadium, people just sort of being unironically patriotic, and it not being an issue, just people, like, cheering on the United States and knowing, like, hey, we're going to, like, kick everybody's butt for 2 weeks, and this is going to be awesome. Yes. Let's enjoy this moment. And Los Angeles being no discussion of, like, red state, blue state, or anything like this. It was just, like, everybody really did seem united for these, like, couple weeks. Ronald Reagan was there to open the ceremonies, and to me...
I have a quick thing about that I happened to... after the opening ceremony, I skipped ahead in this clip a little longer, and Peter Jennings was asking Ronald Reagan a question, and the first thing out of Ronald Reagan's mouth, well... And I just stopped. I didn't even want to... it was perfect.
That's it. He got his catchphrase in there. I didn't know this either. I think it was in the Wertheim book. I think he says that like the Soviet boycott was by no means like you might think now like, okay, after 1980 this was going to happen. They were going to do this just to get back. But it was by no means a certainty. But I guess I can't remember the order of the premieres. But you remember when they had like people were dying over there?
Yes.
Like the one that died was replaced by the guy that replaced him was a real hardliner, and he was the one that made the decision to like finalize it. Okay, we're not doing this. And then countries like East Germany followed them or whatever.
Yes.
So
Brezhnev.
There was Andropov and Chernenko So I don't know which is which. Yeah, it was
those two died pretty quickly.
Yeah. So it was by no means, but hey, what a great moment for Reagan though.
Yeah.
I mean, and it turned out, the United States did dominate and look good, and that was one of the things. I watched an interesting clip of. It was a BBC News report of the Soviet boycott. And just kind of like saying, one of the reasons they gave was like the security, because Los Angeles is too wild. The United States is we can't guarantee the security of it. And they show like footage of like armed security guys training in like Los Angeles for the event, or for security, and like the United States said that there. It's like, well, I don't know, that doesn't necessarily look all that much assuring, but it was kind of a trumped up thing, that the Soviets did, and they were doing other stuff to try to undermine, like sort of softly undermine the Olympics, but it didn't work.
So So I'll tell you things I actually watched. I did not watch yachting or hammer throwover.
I'm very disappointed. But
dressage or
dressage.
I like seeing those in there.
Yeah.
The rifle shooting.
Yeah. And for all we know, like those could have been taking place like in Oregon or something, you know?
Yeah.
I don't even know where they.
I know that the like dressage medals are the last ones handed out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's in the closing.
Yeah, they actually
all these people sitting on horses.
Yeah. Well, did you? That's
I kind of just breezed by that. But.
There was one of the comments they made, like they sort of alluded to this, was that they were going to have like the equestrian. They changed the order of things because supposedly David Wolper didn't want the horses like messing up his field before this.
Understandable.
And like Peter Jennings and Jim McKay sort of like, I heard so and so, and they sort of made a reference to that, and it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of. So you did not watch most of the horse acts.
No, I did not. Boy, they had a pantomime horse, of course. Yeah, would have watched that. So I could not find Carl Lewis's long jump.
Yeah,
which I know is controversial, so we can come back to that. But I did watch his 3 running events, finals. All exciting. Of course, memories of Carl Lewis. Like I remember thinking he was cool, but I know a lot of people didn't like him. I feel like my dad probably didn't like him.
Yeah,
for the reason the bad buzz about him of being arrogant.
He was polarizing. Yes.
Yes, but it was exciting. He was a great athlete.
Yeah, and he was like drafted by the Cowboys and the Bulls or something like that. Like,
yes. Yeah.
So, I guess kind of a gimmick, but still.
And I think someone on the relay team was going to be playing for the Rams or some particular announcer mentioned that.
Yes.
Welcome. So I watched those and Edwin Moses, and there was that clip, the sort of post-mortem on the Mary Decker thing, and the gymnastics all around, and then the closing ceremonies. I think that's about all I watched.
You didn't watch team handball like I?
Oh, I did watch that. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that. Team handball is like a sport that fascinates me. I think it's really fun to watch, but I'd never see it outside the Olympics.
Yeah, you just mentioned handball, and I expected handball, like racquetball without the racket.
Right.
And from what I could tell, I mean, this was just kind of wrapping it up. I mean, it looks like soccer, but with hands.
Pretty much, yeah. It's. And as announcer Al Troutwig says in the final, the referees might stop it for like in between goals, but there's no timeouts and there's unlimited substitutions, so it's always moving.
Right. Yeah.
So it's actually a pretty cool sport.
Weird, but there was an interesting thing that happened.
Yeah, during the medal ceremony.
Yeah.
Like a section of the stands like collapsed.
Right, like the Korean team went over to hand flowers to the crowd. I think. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people, the railings fell, and like 8 people fell.
Yeah.
And got minor injuries, but they did get taken to the hospital. And it was like whoever was talking about it was like, as you're watching keep your eye on the left hand.
Yeah.
Behind the left. And I was like, okay, whatever. You'd kind of warn me something happened, and then all of a sudden, these people just collapsed, and I don't know if fell 10 feet or something, but
yeah, that was weird.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things where
and no one, like the people on the medal stands don't know.
Right.
The Chinese team's getting their picture taken.
They're still singing their anthem and waving their flags, and while this is all going on and you see people being carried out on stretchers.
Yeah, and
I guess people are okay. It's one of those things where if this were live,
right,
there'd be a certain demeanor, but now they can cover it a little bit differently because it's a taped event.
Yeah.
Otherwise, but if this had happened live, it would be like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Right.
It's just one of these bizarre things that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And probably not a whole lot of coverage, I'm sure. That was one of the sports that would probably struggle for airtime in a pre-cable universe where you're just putting everything on ABC and you can't devote a lot of time to team handball.
Right. And I saw a lot of clips, I didn't watch them, but of synchronized swimming and I seem to remember them devoting a lot of time to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was that year or 88, just remember them.
I think this was the
showing it and talking about it a lot, like the sort of movie antecedents of it, and showing clips from Esther Williams movies or something.
Yeah, I think I saw one of the preview special they had. I was watching. Esther Williams actually talked about the sport. And was kind of introducing it.
This was the first year.
I think it was the first year that it was a medal sport, at least.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, and there was a few others like maybe rhythmic gymnastics.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the themes of the Olympics was like the increased number of women's sports.
Right.
Which I take for a lot of that for granted now, but
yeah.
And the number of sports keeps growing, it seems like. But yeah, that was a lot of these were brand new back then.
Right.
So some of the ones you mentioned. So Carl Lewis.
Yeah.
I like Carl Lewis.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like a winner and he was awesome.
You're a big Ricky Henderson fan, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Probably a good comparison, right?
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and he was dominant. And it's funny, like in the 100 meter, I think the 100 meter is the one where it looks like he doesn't quite run through. Like he might have gotten a record maybe if like he celebrates a little bit early.
Right.
Which seems like pretty dumb.
Yeah.
But and apparently, so this is kind of an interesting about the coverage in the Wertheim book, and it's a little bit hard to tell tell this from the way it's presented in some of the clips that we watched, I think. But I think it was the 4x100 where he got his 4th gold medal, which tied Jesse Owens' record. That event was apparently a little weird because I guess Marty LaCourie or whoever the other track announcer was detained and he couldn't get there in time.
Yeah.
So they hustled O.J. Simpson to the booth to do color with Al Michaels, who was like the big track guy. And I guess they told Al Michaels, you know, like in his ear, they're just saying, okay, just start talking. We're not. And he's like, well, what do you mean just start talking? He's like, well, we'll show this taped. We're not going to show this live. And he's like, what? We're not going to show it live. He's like, this is a chance to get, you know, a historic race and you're not going to show it live.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much of it they actually did show live, but it's like kind of like something that would never be done.
No.
They would hold the race,
you
know, until whatever else is going on. They would not do it like that. But I thought the whole thing was kind of interesting, and you know, it was a smoothly run games, but it wasn't perfect. There was weird stuff that happened.
I can totally imagine Al Michaels doing that. Come on.
Yeah. A youngish Al Michaels.
Yes, youngish.
In 1984, and what a great announcer. And I really enjoyed listening to him on the track events.
And, you know, OJ seems to know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if he did.
I don't either,
Yeah, he sounds like it.
He comes across better here than he did on, like, Monday Night Football, I think, most of the time. And I guess he was a sideline reporter on NBC. But, yeah, listening to, like, in the snippets of track coverage here, you're like, okay, this is why they had him. He's a great TV personality.
Yeah, and he's done his homework.
Beloved.
And, you know, as he said, many times, if these numbers if this had been an elevation, these probably would have been world records.
That's right.
Which is a big deal. I was reading about Carl Lewis, and he wouldn't run races at elevation because he wanted to get world records for real.
Oh, you know, I wanted to watch the long jump too.
Yeah, that is
confusing,
controversial because he got such a good score that he knew he was going to win, and he didn't do all his jumps and didn't seem to bother even attempting to go for the world record.
Which is weird.
It is weird, and I guess people read that as arrogant.
Yeah.
Or arrogant/lazy.
Yeah.
You know, maybe though, because it sounded in one of the other races they were talking about how, or in an interview, I think after his 3rd win, he mentioned that he kind of hurt his hamstring a little bit doing the long jump. So, I mean, maybe it's self-preservation too.
I mean,
I got all these other races to run. I mean, because we forget that they're the heats building up to the finals.
Right. He's got a responsibility to, you know, the whole American team and himself. And so, I kind of understand that point of view. And each race is so intense that even beyond just like the physical aspect, there's the mental preparation. If you can, you know, win and coast in a thing, you know, I can't say I blame him.
But he got booed.
Yeah.
And then his attitude is like, well, you know, it was bothering me at first, and I was like, oh, but it just means they want to see more of me.
Yeah,
so.
That's nice. But I mean, the long jump is one of the coolest visually coolest events to watch, I think.
Yeah.
And you can see a lot of this stuff, like, you know, there's the Bud Greenspan movies, like that. Every year he would do like a documentary, like a very artfully filmed, super long documentary, like summarizing the Olympics. Those are really cool to watch. But I was really interested in watching the original coverage.
Yeah.
And also you can see like some of these clips, like the official like Olympic channel or whatever. They'll have like footage a lot of times without announcers, which to me is just kind of weird.
Yeah.
Watching it that way. So I didn't want to see a lot of it. I was trying to watch like the ABC stuff wherever possible. But the Carl Lewis stuff was fun.
Yeah, and Edwin Moses. He's another figure I remember from that time.
Yeah, and he was a guy who'd won like 100-some races
in a row.
One of the most dominant athletes ever.
Yeah, you hadn't
the hurdles. Yeah, and so he won in 1976 and didn't get a chance to compete in 1980. So he had to wait like 8 years essentially for another Olympic shot. And this is one of the things that fascinates me about these sports is people that train for something that happens once every 4 years, and you know that's your chance.
Yeah.
I mean, one false start,
right,
and you could be torpedoed. And one thing I thought that was interesting about the Edwin Moses race was something that I hate now. It's like I don't remember this being a thing back then, but they kept showing like his wife being all nervous.
Yeah,
it's like I don't really need to see this. You
right.
know?
Yeah,
and it's like this is starting to creep in where now you see all these reaction shots of people in the stands. Like I don't need to see a bunch of that.
Yeah.
Overall, I didn't see a lot of that in this ABC Olympics coverage.
Now, all of that stuff I found very hard to follow visually. I'm sure they're much better at filming it now, but you know, because they're at such a distance for most of it. It's like, and you know, Al Michaels and OJ are like they can tell who's ahead.
Right. Yeah.
You know, because especially the long, you know, slightly longer ones, they're doing curves and everything's staggered and like, I can't even tell who's who.
I know what you mean.
Until like Carl Lewis, you know, especially because I guess his usual mode was starting a little slow and then blasting ahead of everyone, so you can tell when that happens.
Yeah.
But until then, it's just like, I believe you, but
yeah, no, totally.
you know.
And I think I actually think the announcers in general, from what I saw, I thought they did a pretty good job covering other countries.
Yeah.
You hear, oh, it's jingoistic and everything. It's well, you're naturally going to cover the Americans, and especially in this Olympics.
Right.
Edwin Moses is the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to give the other guys to do it. And I thought Al Michaels in particular was doing, they'd explain what the other athletes were, and I found that in a lot of. I was overall very impressed with the coverage. I thought as a sporting event they handled it very well.
Yeah, and Edwin Moses, you can tell. I mean, he's pretty much ahead.
Yeah, that was he didn't really leave much doubt about that, did he? Now
it's just not as showy. People don't think about the hurdles as much.
No,
even though I think it's probably more difficult.
Yeah,
you got to jump stuff.
It's very interesting to watch. Yeah.
Have you ever jumped hurdles?
Not intentionally, no.
In high school, I took a couple, maybe just in regular gym, and then I took a basketball track and field class. It was mostly basketball, but I had to jump hurdles, and it was just scary. I don't want to. I'm short.
Yeah.
And once you do it a few times, it's okay, I guess.
Right.
And it's not going to kill you if you hit the thing, but they're running.
Yeah.
High speed. And of course, he's really tall and everything. But
talk about athleticism. I mean, that event's so cool.
So, and I definitely remembered the whole Mary Decker Zola Budd thing. Not just because of what happened, but that was one I can remember them building the narrative around all that beforehand. Because Zola Budd had come out of nowhere and ran barefoot and all that, and had all these calamities even before this, and Mary Decker was the golden girl.
Right. I mean, that's one of the biggest letdowns of the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Or one of the biggest disappointments was her losing, and that image of her crying,
And,
But I was very impressed by the coverage of that. I don't know if you watched the same thing I did, where
the day after thing.
Yeah, they're sort of doing the analysis, and Al Michaels and that Marty guy.
Yeah, Marty LaCourie is kind of, well, I'm going to jump the gun and totally blaming Zola Budd.
Yeah, I thought it was very.
It was very,
he's admitting he was wrong.
Yes.
They're doing slow motion. He's explaining it in a calm way.
And not just slow motion. Super slow motion.
Yeah, super slow motion. Yes. Yeah, it was still ambiguous. I mean, it was kind of a cool moment in sport. It's something you can't be 100% sure, but I thought they did a good job of explaining it and giving some reasoned analysis.
Yes.
That. I think he even said, didn't he say something this might not be popular with a lot of our viewers?
Then him saying he said a lot of the people in the stadium.
Yeah.
Well, they're not watching you.
Yeah. I don't know what maybe in the restrooms they had a live feed of.
You hear what Marty LaCourie's saying? I used to like him.
Yeah. Why couldn't
he said too much LaCourie, if you know what I mean. Yeah, and then I watched a British broadcast of the actual race.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they were very. Because that was the one, it just popped up, I think, because I watched that. Mm-hmm. It's let me see the actual race. And their initial take, I think, seemed closer to his next day, which she might have cut in a little close. But but watching that slow motion, I mean, Zola Budd's, the way her legs are sprawling and stuff, that is almost more concerning just visually.
Yeah.
Because they don't really talk about exactly what Mary Decker's injury was, but, she doesn't look like she just falls down.
Yeah.
Whereas Zola Budd's legs are at angles that should not be.
And get stepped on with track spikes or whatever.
Yeah.
On her feet.
Right, and then
looked at it.
If you watch the whole race too, she totally runs out of steam. I mean, she ends up she gets disqualified, but she ends up in 6th or 7th place by the end. So I mean, that seems more like maybe you should have. She pushed herself too early to be up front,
Right. Well, it's just weird, seeing, because there were 2 or 3 others too, and just they're all bunched up so close.
Yeah.
It's man.
I know.
It's just that looks crazy.
And then the other two, the blonde woman, I think she's Romanian, so she ends up winning. Mm-hmm. And then there's another British racer who gets a silver. So the British announcers were happy about that.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, they're British announcers, so it's hard to tell exactly what they were.
Well, that reminds me that I watched a clip of a CBC, of some Canadian winning, a men's swimmer winning a race.
Uh-huh.
And they were pretty excited and pumped up about it. It was why not?
Check it out, eh?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to watch some more international footage of that, but yeah. But it was just well, okay, it's not. I thought the Americans announcers were fairly restrained, appropriately enthusiastic.
Right.
Where it should be. I mean, this is a huge moment for the Olympics and for the country. And I didn't think the announcers were totally getting overly. It was more the awe of the athletic achievements, Mary Lou Retton.
Yeah.
Hitting these 10s.
Right, but they seem equally awed with the Romanians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least Kathy Rigby does. I think they both the announcers do.
It's very professional. Good job.
Yeah, that was the interesting one where they kept. Here's a little bit on tape.
Yeah.
And I never quite. I guess they kept saying, 4 things are going on at once, but they seem staggered in some ways. So, although sometimes you hear the music while someone else is.
Yeah.
The floor exercise music. Like Mary Lou Retton, I guess it was someone else's floor exercise music, but while she's doing the uneven bars, Eye of the Tiger is playing.
Yeah, I would think
I also had to do that in junior high. It was in a co-ed class, and we did a gymnastics thing.
Really?
Yeah, that and the vault, which was super scary.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to...
Yeah,
I don't want to crash into that thing.
The one I always thought was like the weirdest one was like the uneven bars.
Yeah, that's weird.
Like people like literally bouncing off the poles and stuff.
Yeah, they're pretty soft. But
it just looks weird.
It does, yeah. And
I mean, cool, but...
I fell off those.
Ooh.
Landed on my back.
Oh.
So, yeah, that was exciting. And I mean, that's like an hour. It took up a lot of time to watch, but I watched the whole deal there. And yeah, it's just super exciting when she does that. She does the vault and gets a 10, which assures her the gold medal. Unlike Carl Lewis,
she
does it again.
Yeah.
Just for fun.
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. I enjoyed that. And yeah, I think it just seemed like there were a lot of these stars. Mary Lou Retton, Carl Lewis, Edwin Moses. Edwin Moses just seemed like, I don't think he ever had like a huge profile.
No.
You know, content to be like awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is cool. Greg Louganis, of course, was huge.
And I sort of remember some of the male gymnasts.
Yeah.
Like Bart Connors.
Bart Connor, yeah.
The Gymkata guy. Wasn't he?
Kurt Thomas?
Is that who it is?
Yeah, well...
Because, I mean, the men did pretty well, too, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm trying to think of other... I do remember that being a thing, like watching like the men's team, too.
Yeah, Kurt Thomas. Okay. Gymkata cracks me up.
Yeah, there's like... I actually like... I always like some of the team sports, like water polo and stuff, and volleyball stuff. And those sports don't get a lot of... I mean, that's one good thing about TV now, is that if you really want to watch Olympic water polo, you're going to be able to get it. You know?
Yeah.
You'll have the option to it, whereas then you really had to wait for morsels and maybe hope they'd make it into the highlights packages, or maybe, you know, during the late night shows or whatever, they'd run those matches.
I mean, water polo is impressive, but I don't remember it being easy to follow.
It's hard to see what's going on, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, you know, one of my college roommates played water polo.
Oh, okay.
And he'd talk about like how physical it was, like underneath,
Oh,
but you can't see that.
Yeah.
Like just people like beating
slamming
each other up and
Okay.
stuff, you know? So yeah, I'm not sure that's as good on TV, but it's something different.
Right.
Like I'd rather watch that than swimming in general, unless there's like a Michael Phelps storyline.
Yeah.
You know, where somebody's like totally dominant or the
Right.
best ever. Like you said, with so many heats, to me it's just easier to think of like a tournament.
Yeah.
You know, where there's winners and losers, and maybe you've got like a knockout rounds where maybe you can lose and still come back if a round robin. But I like those tournament structures.
Yeah.
Or something where it's like a javelin where it's something measurable.
Right.
Not judging.
Probably doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
To broadcast.
And in the boxing, speaking of judging,
did you watch?
Mike Tyson lost at the trials.
Oh, okay.
To like Henry Tillman. He was like kind of crushed, but it was kind of one of those things where Henry Tillman was skilled at doing things to win points, you know, which is kind of a different thing. And Evander Holyfield, I don't think he wound up medaling, but he wound up having the best pro career of all the people.
Yeah.
The guy they kept typing was like Mark Breland, and they had some other guys too, but I just watched a little bit of the boxing.
Don't they the gloves have like white on them to help, like the white has to strike things or something?
Yeah, there's certain things, and then they made it like more of an electronic thing. And I think it was it 88 or 92 where they had Roy Jones, and I think it was Seoul, Korea, where Roy Jones became one of the best boxers of all time, but he got jobbed.
Yeah.
And then they changed and made more like electronic scoring and stuff to kind of prevent that from happening. But I kind of liked the Olympic boxing when I was younger too. That was something that, you know, I identified like I'm a boxer. But I got into that a little bit more, and it was kind of interesting hearing.
Well, and it's like, all right, it's only 3 rounds or something.
Yeah. And it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like the wrestling, they had Jeff Blatnick. I don't know if you saw of him. Like, he was a cancer survivor that came on to win like the Greco-Roman gold, you know, and he was like one of the faces of the U.S. Wrestling teams. That was like big. They all kinds of successes. Just truly a tremendous event. And yeah, the United States dominated in the medal count, as you would expect.
Yeah. So how about this closing ceremony?
Yeah, should we talk about the closing ceremonies?
Yes. Again, I didn't watch all of it, but
I mean, yeah, it was one thing. Like, there were multiple videos, and like 2 hours and 48 minutes. I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm not going to watch all of this. But
yes, because some of it is like speeches, or again the teams marching in.
Right, they do that.
Yeah,
but they went backwards for the closing ceremony.
Right,
which is fascinating.
Like literally backwards.
I kid.
Yes.
That would have been a nice twist.
200 Olympic athletes were injured while marching backwards. Once again, Mary Decker.
Yes.
Tripped over Zola Budd. So I'm trying to remember. 2 things stand out, but the final 2 things. I know there were a lot of fireworks, and there was like a handoff to Seoul and some dancing and stuff.
You get night falling. You know, it's starting with sunset and then going kind of, and night would come, and you get the visual of like the fireworks, tons of fireworks.
Yes.
Lots of fireworks.
Yeah. And the torch being extinguished. There was something before that was nice in Jim McKay's. Well, that's not going to be the most emotional part.
Yeah.
And the torch, it's like there was some Philip Glass music playing and some sort of poetry being read by Richard Basehart.
Yeah, yes, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and this huge flame goes out. I'm like, oh, wow, it's very stirring.
Lori and I were laughing because it's at some point, I forget, Jim McKay was like, well, it's 10 minutes to 11 East Coast time, but if you're thinking about going to bed, don't do it because you'll regret. Everybody will be telling you what you missed tomorrow. It was just doing it kind of like in a, again, kind of a rather mild-mannered way, but just kind of like hyping up, the building this up, like, oh, you don't want to miss this.
Yeah.
But it was pretty late. But yeah, and then, so I didn't watch a lot of the musical stuff, but they had like dancers and...
Right. I didn't watch a lot of the pre-stuff.
Well, you did watch the arrival...
Oh.
I hope
of the visitor from beyond.
Yes, a truly historic moment, an apparent extraterrestrial visitor.
Yeah, and I was almost fast forwarded over that, and then I'm like, was that a spaceship?
Yeah,
and it was. I still don't understand what was happening there.
It was weird.
Some sort of vehicle that some guy made.
Yeah,
hovering over the Coliseum, like 1,000 feet over the Coliseum, and then they did the Close Encounters thing where the marching band or the orchestra was playing the John Williams stuff, and the spaceship was playing it back.
Yeah, and
the thing with the flashlights was really cool.
Oh yeah, everyone
got a flashlight.
The PA announcer, turn on your flashlights.
Let's put it on the blue setting.
Yeah,
these flashlights could be red, white, and blue.
Yes.
And they all it looked really cool on TV, and I'm sure it did in person. It looked like stars.
And Jim McKay's giving like updates on the altitude of it's the Goodyear blimp or something. But it's, like if the Goodyear blimp was like moving around up and down and something, or descending.
Right. Yeah.
1,000 feet.
Yeah. Peter's only in Southern California.
Yeah.
Clearly was Hollywood muscle getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Somewhere in I think it was a closing ceremony, he said he had a shot of Henry Winkler in the audience.
Dustin Hoffman. I believe Jimmy, someone you are familiar with. There. Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn.
Uh-huh.
I saw a shot of them where they didn't get graphics, but it was them.
I think I saw it in the gymnastics. I saw Linda Evans. There was Linda Evans, a big gymnastics supporter.
They really should have had Jack Nicholson, though.
Yeah.
His presence was missed.
Right.
But so we get like an apparent alien being.
Yes. Yeah, I thought the ship was going to land in the field, but it landed in the parking lot.
Yeah, I guess that's good enough.
Yeah. But yeah, and a apparent alien being comes out, Jim McKay.
Yes,
it was just a 7'8" man.
This is not an alien being. This is a man in a suit. He's 7 foot tall.
Yeah.
Very reassuring.
And he said, some message of hope from he'd been watching the Olympics and
like said something like we congratulate
and by the way,
you.
Thus spake Zarathustra. The 2001 music was playing while all this was going on for a while.
Yes, that's right. Later, the theme song of Nature Boy Ric Flair, who I believe at the time was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, yet somehow not at these ceremonies. But
maybe he was in the stands.
Yeah, he's challenging Jeff Blatnick to a match. If you're
that would have been a weird Olympics if Ric Flair had just tackled that alien.
Yeah, that's right. And Jeff Blatnick would have called Ric Flair a company champion if he didn't accept his challenge afterwards. Ric Flair would have taken him on, I think. Yeah. But it was a very hopeful message and saying something like, hopefully, you can all get it together and not blow up the planet. We'll be watching you, something like that.
Right, and then he vanished.
I kind of wanted him to leave with something like ambiguous or like some kind of ominous thing, like, we'll be watching.
Yes.
Like, what? And just for Jim McKay and Peter Jennings to, sobering words there at the end.
By the alien.
Right.
Yeah, and then Lionel Richie comes out. Historic performance of All Night Long, which I certainly didn't see back then. I mean, it was a few months away from the beginnings of my Lionel Richie fandom, but read about it somewhere, maybe in People magazine or something later. Yeah. But, it comes out on the big stage and he's had special opening verse about the Olympics. Cool. Yeah, that was cool. And I think I spied his band, but then there's also an orchestra and then all these dancers come out and it turns out they're poppers and break dancers. Yes, Jim McKay was very proud to offer his knowledge of
the style of folk dancing popular in Los Angeles.
It started in New York, spread across the country.
Right.
And it was a lot of breakdancers and poppers.
It sure was, yeah.
Poppers, he explained later, that the people, it sounded like someone had told him in his earpiece, but poppers are the ones that are standing and doing sort of geometric patterns, I guess what he said, or angular patterns, the breakdancers, and he was impressed. Yeah. And someone, a guy was doing a head spin, and I think Peter Jennings, how do you do that? One of them said that.
Yeah. And now breakdancing is an Olympic sport.
Yeah. Is it?
Yes.
Really?
It's a Summer Olympic sport now.
All right.
So, hey, we've come a long way, finally.
Yeah.
Breakdancing, part of the games.
In the middle of the thing, like part of the stage rose up and Lionel's on this big raised star above everyone, and then that lowered back down, I guess. And he left and the breakdancing kept going.
Yeah. This is a great performance.
Yeah.
He was running around the stadium and
Yes.
kind of vamping on the all night longs and everything.
Yeah.
This is like 100,000 people.
Yep.
And this is a stadium, classic stadium setting. And
yeah.
He's got everybody like entertained. He's
the athletes are dancing.
Yeah,
that's the Olympic, whatever they call the like guides or whatever.
Yeah.
Employees, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some special name for them.
Stooges?
Escorts?
No, yeah.
Yeah, stooges.
The Olympic stooges.
Yeah.
Having their moment.
That's right.
I enjoy. Yeah.
Well, Curly's now got his head caught in the rings.
Big props to Lionel Richie.
Yeah.
After this and watching that We Are the World documentary, my respect for Lionel Richie has improved. I shouldn't say improved. It's increased several fold. I mean, what a era this was for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder. I don't know if this is. I mean, he was already on a high here, but I feel like this must have boosted his Q rating even more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Just what a great way to close things, and it was cool. And the celebration, like the song, was very fitting, and just that really struck me too, is like seeing all the athletes dancing, and just a nice thing. And then I think you'd hear like stray PA announcements like, okay, choir, please leave the stage, and just like, okay, now everybody may leave the stadium.
Yeah.
That was a little weird, but it was still nice. And then did you watch, I don't want to give short due to Lionel Richie,
no,
did you watch the 20 minutes of end credits, the network?
No, I saw that they were running.
Yeah.
While the fireworks are going on.
It was kind of cool because the fireworks are going and they're showing, and Jim McKay just wrapping it up. He's like, and now we'll see the names of the many people that brought these games to you. And he's just giving Rune Arledge, and just like, just all these names and like, excellent job, great work, and just periodically they showed like the makeup, thank goodness for the makeup people, And just going on and seeing like as you go on, and like I was kind of watching, and it was cool because they just showing people like with handhelds going around getting footage like the people dancing and stuff. And there was one apparently an athlete giving another one a kiss, and it's like ooh, and then Jim McKay kind of disappointed me, like he mentioned that they were man and wife. He recognized them and said who they were. I was like, oh, I was kind of hoping it was a little bit something more salacious. Yeah. But and then saw Bob Iger's name show up in the credits, like way down, and stuff. But he was in the credits.
He was an ABC guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was just kind of cool. But Jim McKay just very casual, like a very slow unwinding. Is like, you'll see us. He said something at one point like, folks, you can't relax yet because we got one more night, because they were doing like a wrap up show the next night too, that he was talking about. Just everything, and then finally was like, and so for Peter Jennings, say goodbye, and just the whole thing was like just this big like massive celebration, and just it was like the perfect way to end it with like these 20 minutes of credits, and then leading of course into a post-credits scene where they have Thanos threaten them for the Seoul Olympics. Kim Jong-il threatened the Seoul Olympics. No, they didn't do that, but no. They could have. Although that's another thing that they sort of alluded a couple times, like, well, there's some political situations that have to resolve themselves, but hopefully we'll get that straightened out before Seoul. They did say that like a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries didn't have diplomatic relations with South Korea. Yeah. So that would be part of what was going on. Yeah. And I guess that wound up not being a thing that I remember, but yeah, it's just a very nice note of joy, and just this quiet moment, and the ever classy Jim McKay wrapping things up. I actually enjoyed it. I think we watched like those whole like 15 to 20 minutes of just ABC credits, watching these names go by and seeing some familiar names, and it was a cool way to wrap up the whole thing.
Yeah, I couldn't be bothered. But I like that now.
Yeah.
And it's stirring memories of that happen. Like maybe not that one, but watching some Olympics where Jim McKay was going on and on. Like that. And even on now, every now and then when I see a sporting event, every now and then, and thanks to our director, that's so and so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a lot of times they don't do it as much as they used to because they've got something else going on, or they're promoting something. Yeah. Or they got to whisk away to another event, and that's another thing, just how clean.
I was about
the visuals are, right?
Yeah. I mean, you get what you need, but there's no bugs and promos for other things. And
oh, exactly. Yeah.
it's just, and like when I watched that British one, the only thing they had on was the clock.
Yeah. That's funny.
Every now and then the Longines logo would pop up for just a second and they would go away.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, this is so refreshing.
And there were commercials, you know, you had your McDonald's, your Budweiser, but they were in between. You know, they'd come back. They weren't all over the screen.
Yeah. I saw Lowenbrow one.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't see that.
It was one of the later ones where they kind of changed the song. Or guys were playing basketball.
I mean, just what an event. Things went out right. And this may have been peak 1980s, peak USA, all of that, I think. Peak Olympics for sure.
Yes.
What a great event.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say about it, but it just, watching those clips felt good.
Yeah.
Got chills, even though I like knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is like nostalgia and childhood, but really there's just something cool about that whole moment. And let's hope, you know, we can all recreate it again in 2028. That'd be something else. But Los Angeles, you know, you got another shot at it, and may you succeed as well as you did in 1984.
Yeah, let's hope another a real spaceship doesn't arrive. It would be weird.
Yeah. Well, Jim McKay's not around to tell us one way or another, so I don't know who I'm going to be falling for guidance on that. And neither is Peter Jennings, unfortunately.
No.
We'll muddle through it somehow.
Hopefully Al Michaels will still be around.
Yes.
I know he's kind of retired. But
yeah. Well.
Costas, maybe.
Yeah.
I would trust him if he told me that the alien was not real. Either of them, I would.
Yeah. Some other people, you know, maybe. Well, I don't want to name any names. It'll be NBC, I'm sure. They got the Olympics forever now, so you know that's just the way it is.
I don't know. I can kind of imagine Al Michaels was watching that, maybe
watching the alien arrival.
Yeah, maybe making some wise cracks about it.
Well, a guy that listened to Howard Stern, and
that's right.
Because I was listening to, you know, I was thinking about him calling in, you know, during the OJ stuff, and thinking, you know, he wasn't just a neighbor of, you know, he was a colleague of a broadcast colleague of OJ Simpson, not just his Brentwood neighbor.
Yeah, I know. With that Howard Stern moment.
But yes.
With Peter Jennings.
Yes, that's right. I guess what we're trying to say is what an Olympics.
What an Olympics, yeah. Let's not go out on, we'll go out on what an Olympics. A good time.
Truly remarkable event. This episode brought to you by the majesty, power, and grace of humanity in peak athletic condition. This episode also brought to you by Foursquare. One day, the IOC will recognize it. One day. This episode also brought to you by Baddies, the breakfast of geniuses. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.